Hi everyone, this is Matt. Welcome back to Touchgrass Gardening. Today we're going to talk about what you should do when your tree starts growing from the ground instead of from the top. Do you cut it? Do you leave it? Are there differences? Should you ever leave it? Should you always cut it? And then I'm going to talk about one of my trees that's been totally taken over by what's coming out of the ground and how to fix it. So let's get going. So for most fruit trees, they're going to be what's called grafted, where the actual variety of fruit that you're going to be getting, like this Arizona sweet orange that's here, it's that variety that's on top. And then on the bottom, right here, it's going to be a different tree. So it's grafted on top. And the reason that's done is because this rootstock, the roots of the tree, are generally more vigorous, more hardy, and it's going to help support the tree. Whereas what's on top is just the best fruit. And that's not really the most important part of keeping your tree strong. It's really the roots that are down there. But the reason that sometimes causes problems is because the rootstock is so vigorous, it's going to try to grow from the rootstock as well and not just from the top of your tree. So for most fruit trees that are grafted, you're going to want to stay on top of it and make sure that you're cutting these things that come up from the bottom of your tree. A lot of people, they just want to leave things, let them go. But what can happen is that your rootstock will take over your tree, and then this part up here, which is where the fruit comes from that you actually want, will stop growing well. You really don't want that, and that's why on most grafted trees, you want to stay on top of getting rid of this stuff that's growing from the bottom. The way that you can tell is, especially with smaller trees, it'll be really thick down here and it'll start being thinner up here, and that's where they grafted onto it. And it's very obvious. And I'm going to show you on some of my newer trees how you can see the obvious graft about whether or not you should do this. So I wanted to show how a lot of grafted fruit trees look from the nursery. And once you see this, you won't unsee it. So this is one of my newest trees. This is an Indian jujube. And it's grafted onto pretty vigorous rootstock. You can see even here, it's starting to grow from the bottom. And you can see where the graft is, where it's pretty thick. And there's this part of the tree that just looks different. And so they cut a stick from the original Indian jujube and then put it on some hardy rootstock. And now it's starting to grow from this tree. And this tree has actually been pretty difficult for me to get started because it just keeps growing from the rootstock and from the bottom. And that's why this is so thick. It's thicker than the tree because it just keeps growing from here. And so I'm having to just keep pushing what grows on here off and cutting what grows down here off. But now finally this week, you can see that above where the graft point is, there's new growth coming in here. And so finally, there's parts of this tree that are growing. This is known as a tree that is one that is pretty skinny and likes to flop over. So you're going to be doing a fair amount of trimming. So basically, I just want to make sure that I'm on top of the rootstock and making sure that all the energy that this tree grows goes into the main graft and not the roots that are coming up. So I want to talk about trees and fruit trees that aren't necessarily grafted. There's other ways that trees are propagated, by seed, by cutting, by air layering. And you can see with pomegranates in particular, they like to grow from the bottom and be more bush-like. And most of them are done through an air layering process. And so they wrap tinfoil around a tree and build roots on the tree, then they cut off that branch and then they put it in the ground. So it's an exact copy of the fruit variety that's already on the tree. And anything that grows from it is going to be that fruit. So even if you get something growing from the ground, it's okay. So all of my pomegranate bushes, I just let them grow pretty much from the ground, and the fruit is always the same. One way that you can also tell, and we're going to talk about this in the next tree that I prune, is if you see what's coming from the ground is much more vigorous than what's already existing on your tree, and what's existing on your tree is starting to die, then you know that what you have that's coming from the ground is rootstock, because it wants to take over. Those suckers want to take over the tree because they're inherently more vigorous. And also the fruit just isn't going to taste good if you ever get fruit from them. But with something like a pomegranate that's usually air layered, you can tell and you can see how it's coming up from the ground. It likes to be a bush, and then I can get more fruit if I let those things come up and grow fully. So this is a rainbow cassia tree, and it's a variant of the cassias that you see with the big yellow blooms. This one actually has rainbow colored blooms, and it's a tree that is pretty rare and is usually grafted. Now the nursery I bought it from, they don't know if this was air layered or grafted, but what I'm starting to see on this tree is that the parts that are coming from the ground are actually much more vigorous than the parts that existed when I bought the tree. And I'm worried that that part is just going to take over and I'm only just going to have a normal cassia. I don't want that. So what I'm going to do today is cut off the parts that are coming from the ground and then just keep the original tree that I believe is grafted, because it's thicker around the trunk and it's also looking quite weak as these parts of the tree that came from the ground, like this is one of the main parts of the tree that came up from the ground. This is taking over, and I'm worried that it's going to kill my tree if I don't remove it. So there's two parts of the tree that I think are below the graft. This big one here is taking over the tree, very vigorous. There's one more back here, it's kind of small, also coming from what I think is below the graft. So my plan is to cut this off, and then leave the original tree. All right, so now let's cut it. The first thing I'm gonna think about is where are there crisscrossing branches between those that I wanna keep and those that I wanna get rid of. So I'm gonna cut off the branches of the sucker, so it's easier when I cut off from the bottom. It doesn't break any branches when I pull it out. So that's the first thing we're gonna do. Then after that, we're gonna cut off from the bottom where the sucker's coming out of the ground. And I'm gonna use a reciprocating saw for that because it's so thick that my pruner and my lopper will kind of get in the way of the tree, and I can't really get a clean cut with a lopper here. So I'm gonna use a saw, which is like this. Pretty simple saw. You can see like that. And I'm gonna make sure that I don't hit the original tree. I'm just gonna cut off the sucker part and cut away from the tree. So I'm not gonna cut into the tree so that I make sure that I don't hit it. You can see how this was the biggest branch in the entire tree. You can see how this really took over the tree. And this was coming from the ground, so it was twice as tall as the original. And it's pretty hard to tell because they're both cassias. I just want to make sure that I'm getting what I paid for, because a rainbow cassia is significantly more expensive than a normal cassia, a popcorn cassia. Now there's one more to cut. There's one more that I think is coming from the rootstock, so let's cut that one as well. This one's also pretty tangled up in there. You can tell this area of my yard was pretty neglected for the past few months. There's been a dumpster and a porta potty here blocking this part of my driveway because we were doing a house renovation. So it was an area that I just didn't really pay much attention to. It didn't have a whole lot of access to. And that's what happens when you aren't really following, making sure your trees are doing well. So that's why this type of maintenance is important. Otherwise you might lose control of your trees. So right now, you can see the tree looks much cleaner. I'm going to cut off a few more of the dead spots, and then the tree should be pretty much ready to go. I'm going to start watching to see if the rootstock starts growing back, stay on top of it. But I think it's going to be in much better shape. There's still a fair bit of the tree that's doing well. And you can see that there was some dieback here, some dieback back there. And that's what really got me worried, that the rootstock was taking over. All dead. I think it's really died back. See, it's all dead. The other thing to think about is, like, can I do this at any time of the year? We're in the middle of summer in Arizona. Normally I don't like to prune, especially hard prune, at this time of the year because it's so hot, but monsoon season just started and we have a 10-day forecast that's all below 110 degrees. The next few days it's 104, which is actually pretty cool for Arizona. And so I felt comfortable doing a hard prune today to give it some time to recover before it gets really hot. So that's why I did it today, and why I think it's okay to try to give this tree a chance to be what it's supposed to be. So this has been our episode on whether or not to cut what's growing from the bottom of your tree off or not. This is something that I was puzzled by when I first started gardening, and a video like this hopefully will help those that are trying to make the decision on if they should cut it off or let it keep growing and getting more fruit from it. So thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please hit that like button. If you haven't yet subscribed, I'd really appreciate if you do subscribe to this video. And if you really love the video, please share it with a friend. Maybe they can learn what you've learned today as well. So thank you again for watching. Oh, and please comment below. I really love reading the comments. It's one of our favorite things when we see comments from where you're from or how you're doing it, or even if there's something that I could improve upon or how you do a lot of your trimming. I'd love to hear it. So please let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you again next time.